Welcome to Reality Theory, episode 18, the CIA, the Knights Templar, and the Sound of Freedom. Sound of Freedom is a new movie about sex trafficking in Colombia. It's getting a lot of hype. When you really look at it, it's not that groundbreaking to me. I haven't seen the movie, but I've read all the reviews and I've read the Wikipedia, and I'm definitely gonna see it when it comes to streaming because it's the type of movie I like. I like action movies. I like people going to Colombia, but I think it's great that it's drawing attention to sex trafficking, but I think sometimes people need to be careful of people who have the message and look at their ulterior motives. So I think we're going to take a look today at Tim Ballard, who is like the centerpiece of Sound of Freedom, and his partner Paul Hutchinson, and their connection to the Knights Templar. So my last episode, Reality Theory episode 17, I dealt with Donald Trump and the Knights of Malta. And the Knights of Malta are a Catholic masonic sect that still exists today, still work with the Catholic Church, but they also work with the CIA, and they also are very big in corporations like Blackwater and in the right wing, and they have a kind of crusader mentality and that they still kind of want to fight a holy war. And this is similar to the Knights Templar. And let's take a look at the Knights Templar and what they are doing. All right, so let's share the screen and slideshow. All right, so here we have Jim Caviezel, who actually plays Tim Ballard in this movie, where Tim Ballard is a Department of Homeland Security expert who goes to Colombia and uncovers a sex trafficking ring, and he busts it, and he's a big hero, and he saves all these kids. Yay! But I think you also need to look at what his background is him being originally a CIA agent. And if you look at the history of the CIA, they don't really fight child trafficking. They get involved in it. They don't really fight drug trafficking. They get involved in it. They don't fight crime. They kind of control and get involved in crime a lot of the time. So him being a former CIA agent already makes me suspect. And again, the Knights Templar are a crusading, holy war, like damn near religious fanatic organization that is intent on promoting Christianity and also fighting Islam and other religions, which is interesting because Tim Ballard is a Mormon. Now, before we get into who he is, let's get into who he isn't. Now, there are rumors going around that he is a child molester because there was a Tim Ballard in Arkansas who was convicted of having sex with a 17-year-old girl and kind of grooming her since she was maybe a 14-year-old girl. And it looks kind of like it is Tim Ballard when you look at the original picture. This is Timothy Ray Ballard, and let's look at his date of birth is November 17th, 1970. That's important. Let's see, he's a male, obviously. His race is white. His eyes are brown. His hair is brown. And he lives in Arkansas. And he was a Baptist principal. That's what he's a principal at a Baptist school. So if you look at these other pictures of Tim Ballard, it does look like they might be the same Tim Ballard, right? It's kind of same round face, stony expression. But if you dig a little deeper and you really look into this Tim Ballard versus the Tim Ballard from Sound of Freedom, you'll see they are two totally different people. So right here we have Tim Ballard again. There is him by himself. And let's play this video because this video makes it look kind of convincing. But I think when you see this is just really good Photoshop, a kind of good illusion, because it makes it look like Tim Ballard is the same sex offender Tim Ballard, right? But that's actually the picture right there. So this Tim Ballard does not look like the Tim Ballard from Sound of Freedom. His face is a lot skinnier. He has a longer nose. And then if we look at another picture of him, that doesn't look like Tim Ballard at all. It looks like the guy from the previous picture. So I don't know if there was some type of error because this Tim Ballard is a Baptist preacher. Tim Ballard from Sound of Freedom is a Mormon. And if you look at the kind of dates of birth, remember, he was born in 1970. Here is Tim Ballard from Sound of Freedom's LinkedIn. So he started Brigham Young in 1994. And before that, he had a 2-year Mormon missionary trip to Chile. So that would make him approximately 49 years old, most likely born in 1973 or 1974. And the other Tim Ballard was born in 1970. And we could see here during the year 2010, when that Tim Ballard was arrested and convicted for child molestation, that this Tim Ballard was working as a special agent and undercover operator for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So it's very unlikely that he would be working as a Baptist preacher at the same time. He's an undercover agent. You have to get real QAnon to really think that there's kind of cover up of pasting a false person of him, false date of birth. And also, this isn't Timothy Ray Ballard. This is Timothy Blaine Ballard. So they have two different middle names. They're not the same age. They don't look the same, except for that one picture, which is a funny picture. That picture doesn't look like the other picture of Timothy Ballard. But this is the important part: is he's not a child molester, but what he is he is a Knight Templar. And these guys are a crazy old religious sect that are actually banned by the Catholic Church and the Kingdom of France for a lot of crazy stuff, which we'll get into. As we see here, a couple other people were knighted, and these people are close with Tim Ballard, Paul Hutchinson, who's like his billionaire benefactor, and Sean David Reyes, who is the Attorney General of Utah and kind of his political muscle who he works with. So all these three guys got knighted at the same time into this crazy religious fanatic sect based on an old crazy religious fanatic sect. So they're also connected to Freemasonry. If you see this kind of graph, that the Knights Templars, the KT, are the top of the Freemasons. Below them is the Order of Malta. Definitely go back and watch my last episode if you haven't seen it. Episode 17, Donald Trump and the Knights of Malta, and we'll see how the Knights of Malta have a big impact on the U.S. military and also subcontractors, military contractors like Blackwater. And or the Red Cross, which is interesting too. And we get into the Red Cross and like kind of the Nazi Vatican rat line. All these Knights of Malta, Knights of Templars all work together to get the Nazis out of Europe and into South America, like Klaus Barbie and Joseph Mengele. So Knights of Malta do exist today. It's not the same Knights of Malta that existed years ago, but it's kind of new fan groups. And we see Alan West, conservative Black politician, is a member of the Knights of Malta. And then we have a knighting ceremony. So you see they wear these white tunics with the red crosses on them, based on the old Knights of Malta knight uniform. So Alan West is a confirmed member. You see him in the picture, and that is a knighting ceremony. They still use the big sword when they knight people into their Knights of Malta, like Paul Hutchinson and Tim Ballard and Sean Reyes. So again, Tim Ballard began his career with the CIA, and this is what makes me suspicious of him. If you watch all my previous episodes of Reality Theory, we do a lot covering the CIA, and there's not a lot that I've seen of the CIA fighting child trafficking. It seems like they work with people who are involved in child trafficking, or they ignore child trafficking. And so after this, he becomes a special agent for the Department of Homeland Security under Obama. And then what happens, he works with all these former CIA and Navy SEAL operatives to have this Operation Underground Railroad, which is, it seems like its own nonprofit, but they work very closely with the U.S. government. And what they do is they go to parties pretending to be pedophiles, and they ask where the young people are. And then once they get the young people, they arrest the bad guys and they save the kids. So it's like a Rambo movie, and they're saving children. What's not to like? So Tim Ballard is also really involved in Afghanistan. Him and Glenn Beck had a thing called the Nazarene Fund, where they were trying to raise money to get all the Christians out of Afghanistan. Once the Taliban took over, they didn't care about anyone else. They just really wanted to focus on the Christians. And as we see here, Tim Ballard is on the same board of advisors for the Afghanistan World Foundation as Henry Kissinger and Dianne Feinstein, as well as the late Anne Heche, who died around a year ago in a crazy circumstance. So again, those are familiar with Henry Kissinger, very much a neocon, very much a warmonger, very much someone who is interested in American political and military power and invading Afghanistan. So him being involved with someone like Henry Kissinger, who is, in my opinion, a lot of other people's opinion, not a good person, a person who brings war, and war, of course, brings death to children, innocent children, and war often is one of the biggest causes of child trafficking. Once you have a chaotic environment with poor people, no infrastructure, that's when children are easily trafficked. This organization, Afghanistan, actually got what's the organization's name again? The Afghanistan World Federation. One of its biggest supporters is George H.W. Bush. In 1988, I accepted with pleasure the honorary chairmanship of the first gala held in the United States to raise the funds for Afghanistan. So this was way back in the communist era. So at first, what happened with this foundation is that they said, hey, these Russians are so bad. Now we need to raise money so we could get rid of the Russians. And then they brought in the Taliban and Mujahideen. That's what the money went to. The money went to the Taliban and Mujahideen, all the Al Qaeda. So they gave all the money to the Islamic revolutionary extremist forces. And then in 2001, when they decided they wanted to invade Afghanistan, they kept the same foundation and they said, now let's save Afghanistan from the right-wing religious extremist Muslims that we put in power to get rid of the communists. So it's just a constant string of war that they have. You know, they fight one guy to get rid of one guy, and they put that pure person in. Then they fight that person and get someone else in, and then they fight that person, whatever. So here's Paul Hutchinson. Paul Hutchinson is Tim Ballard's big partner and the backer of Sound of Freedom, the financial backer. And he, again, was raised Mormon. I think right now you might say he's non-denominational. But he actually gets his money from being a defense contractor. So he, again, is tied into the defense contract. And also, right here, we see he's trained by CIA operatives, Navy SEALs, and CRAV experts. Now, CRAV is a martial arts started by the Mossad. So he's been trained, I'm assuming, by the Mossad. He's also on the FBI Citizens Academy. He's a board member for that. And he is also, like he said, like we went over before, he's a Knight of Templar. And also, he was knighted by the Medici family in San Martino in Rome. All right. Now we see some other things that he have here. That's pretty much the same stuff we have here from before. This is his LinkedIn. 2022 International Medal of Freedom. All right. So here we see that he is the co-owner of Atex Defense Systems, which provides body armor to police and military. So he's definitely tied into the military-industrial complex, has ties to the military, CIA, and law enforcement. Okay. So let's learn more about the Knights Templar. This actually is from my previous episode. So if you read it again, bear with me. So the period of the Crusades extended from 1096 to 1272, and during the early years of the Crusades, 3 orders of knighthood were founded and have left their records on the pages of history. In the order of their establishments, these orders were Knights Hospitallers of St. John in Jerusalem, later known as the Knights of Malta, who we covered in my last episode, and became military in 1119. So they are a military organization, despite them trying to say they're like a non-profit healthcare organization. They're very much a military organization. 2, the Knights of Temple Solomon, or the Knights Templar, which, again, we'll get into the history. It doesn't have the same continuation from the Catholic Church that the Knights Templar has, because the Knights Templar are actually disbanded. Organized 1118 as a military and religious order. And 3, Teutonic Knights of St. Mary in Jerusalem, later known as the Teutonic Knights, organized 1190. The founders of these orders were all of noble birth and were knights at the time of the formation of the orders. There may have been other orders of knighthood in recorded history formed by voluntary association of members, but these 3 are the only ones that come to mind at the present writing. All other recognized chivalric orders were founded by kings or emperors or persons of royalty, such as the Knights of the Round Table by King Arthur, Knights of the Golden Fleece by King Philip, Duke of Burgundy and Flanders, in addition to the Knights Templar and Knights Malta, both of which were formed voluntarily by knights. Freemasonry has the following legitimate order of knighthood: small selective groups which by tradition have backgrounds of royal founding. one, Knights of the Red Cross of Continental, Knights of so all of the 5 named orders of chivalry connected with Freemasonry. So it's a combination of religious Freemason group that both Knights Templar and Knights of Malta, who we covered in the last episode, are having national officers, and are in no sense merely degree conferring groups, but exist as orders of knighthoods with traditional and historical backgrounds. So Knights of Malta is connected all the way to the Catholic Church. They still work with the Catholic Church. They still answer to the Pope. The Knights of Templar do not answer to the Pope. They are a kind of like almost a new fan group that is built on the old Knights Templar. So here's some pictures. Now they're very Game of Thrones. If you think of the sparrows and the High Sparrow, like that's very Knights of Templar. If you watch Game of Thrones, think of these crazy religious fanatical knights who really are fighting a holy war. So their big thing was going to Jerusalem and the Holy Lands, which were occupied by the Islamic people, Muslim people at the time, but they wanted to take the Holy Lands back for religious reasons, not unlike the recapturing of Israel years later. But these guys, religious fanatics who invade people for religious reasons. They weren't defending people. They were just, they just wanted to. They want their own territory. They have their own religious reasons to fight. So here's some more pictures of the Knights Templar. Again, very Game of Thrones. Lots of fights, lots of violence, lots of blood. They were known for their fighting. Here again, more Knights Templar. You can see them with the Red Cross. And again, very Game of Thronesy. Huge, big battles, and they would try and fight to take care of the Holy Land. And they said they were trying to protect Christian pilgrims, but really what they were trying to do is they were trying to take over the Holy Land and eradicate the Muslims at the same time. So it was a very violent crusade. Thou shalt not kill does not mean much to these Christians who love to go to war for holy reasons. So why don't the Knights Templar exist like they did before? Why aren't they like the Knights of Malta? So we're going to get into that right now. On February 13, 1307, we dealt with this again in the last episode, so bear with me if you saw that already. Members of the Order of the Knights Templar in France, under the orders of King Philip IV, were arrested en masse. Amongst the charges levied against the Templars were denying Christ, God, the Virgin, and saints, committing sacrilegious acts against both the cross and images of Christ, denying the sacraments, performing idol worship, absolving fellow Templars of sin, engaging in secret ceremonies, illegally increasing their own wealth, placing obscene kisses on new entrants on the mouth, navel, and buttocks, and practicing sodomy. Undoubtedly, a majority of the charges were legitimate concerns about secular and ecclesiastical authority. So these were rumors going around. They actually had spies in the Knights of Templar who would reveal this. Now, a lot of these confessions that the Knights of Templar made were made under torture, under King Philip's forces. There was Jacques de Molay. He was the kind of leader. He was the last one. He was burned to the stake. So there was a very Game of Thronesy type war between the King of France and the Knights Templar, and the King of France came out the victor, and the Knights of Templar were disbanded. A lot of them became the Knights Malta. So the new Knights Templar have really no historical connection other than inspiration to the Knights Templar, unlike the Knights Malta, when we see people like Eric Prince and Paul Behrens and Joseph Smiths and all sorts of CIA directors like John McCone, Bill Casey. All of these guys were Knights of Malta, and they were connected directly also to the Catholic Church of the Knights of Malta. These new Templar Knights don't have a connection to the Catholic Church, except for their kind of ideological crusading mentality. So according to these sources also that were found, that these Knights Templar, they worshipped a goat god called Baphomet. And this is why a lot of people see them as heretics. In their ceremonies, again, they would have like to be initiated, like there would be homosexual activities such as sodomy, such as kissing. A lot of people would say you had to kiss people on their butt, and also you would have to kind of spit on the cross in a picture of Jesus. So it's really weird. This is definitely some secret society type occult stuff. It's all documented. So, but this is why the Knights of Templar don't exist. Some people will say their confessions were false because they were tortured, but there's a lot of information from spies, from previous information, that these guys definitely had their own crazy secret society. They had their crazy initiation rituals. And when we see in like Freemasonry today, like a lot of the skepticism about it is about the secrecy and especially about their kind of initiation rituals. So here we have Tim Ballard right there. He's behind Sean Reyes. And in this picture, I think we see George Washington, Harriet Tubman, Abraham Lincoln, all looking forward to seeing these grand abolitionist heroes, which is interesting because George Washington actually owned slaves. So I don't know why he would be happy with Tim Ballard freeing these slaves. But this is kind of how he's positioning himself as this kind of abolitionist, the modern day Abe Lincoln, a modern day white Frederick Douglass, kind of freeing these sex slaves from these poor countries. But we'll get into his kind of Mormon faith, and you know, by the Mormon faith, as recently as like 1979, they saw African Americans, or just Africans in general, people with African blood. So that would be Afro-Caribbean, African American, African, Afro-Latino, everything. So when you see these Mormons kind of having their missionary moments, it's very much a white savior moment of them saving these lesser than human people. Tim actually he adopted 2 kids. He found in a sting. So he got these kids in a sting, couldn't find their parents or whatever, and he just kept the kids, which is interesting. So he has 2 Haitian kids, and he's raising them under the Mormon faith. And the Mormon religion and African Americans have had a not too good relationship through the years, and they still really don't. And a lot of the kind of Mormon missionary thing is they need to convert people. So they need to convert people to Mormonism, and they even convert dead people. So they'll go to people's graves and they'll convert them. So again, we're not going to go into a whole thing on the history of Mormonism. I might point a couple videos in the description that will help you get a good idea about them. But this kind of Mormon faith mixed with this kind of Knight Templar mentality combined to have like a crusader, white savior type complex, with Tim Ballard going to places like Haiti and Colombia and rescuing these Afro-French and Afro-Latino people out of poverty, not poverty, sex slavery. And then there's a lot of other good resources. I'm not going to get fully into them. There's AmericanCrimeJournal.com, which has been covering a lot of the behind the scenes corruption of Operation Underground Railroad, which is Tim Ballard's nonprofit, which basically they play like Rambo, James Bond, and they do these undercover sting missions. And they never catch the sex buyers. It's never the sex buyers. It's just the sex sellers. So they're not catching like the white tourists who are coming to take these sex slaves. They just get the black pimps who are selling these sex slaves, which is hey, they're doing something. But it definitely seems like kind of a modern day crusade of him saving these children and taking credit for it, and kind of also spreading his kind of crusader ideology. So now this is one of my problems with someone like Tim Ballard, who is a CIA guy, proponent of the war in Afghanistan, a Knights Templar who are very much in favor of the religious wars from the American government. So go back if you watch the last episode, episode 17, on the Knights of Malta and Donald Trump, and you'll kind of see these kind of crusading Christians in their wars. So let's see what happens with the results of these wars is that wars create sex trafficking. And so we have an article by the New York Times. Afghan pedophiles get free pass from U.S. military, report says. So where was Tim Ballard here? Did he take on the U.S. military? Damn, he cares about Afghanistan. He tried to get the Christians out. But did he ever try and get the sex traffickers out of Afghanistan? So on 5,753 occasions from 2010 to 2016, the United States military asked to review Afghan military units to see if there were any instances of gross human rights abuses. If there were, American law required military aid to be cut off to the offending unit. Not once did that happen. That was among the findings in an investigation into child sexual abuse by the Afghan security forces and the supposed indifference of the American military to the problem, according to a report released on Monday by the Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction, known as SIGAR. The report, commissioned under the Obama administration, was considered so explosive that it was originally marked secret, no foreign, with the recommendation that it remain classified until June 9th, 2042. So the American government is enabling pedophiles, and they're trying to hide it. The report was finished on June 2017, but appears to have included data only through 2016, before the Trump administration took office. The report, released on Monday, was heavily redacted. We'll see a lot more heavily redacted stuff today. And at least in the public portions, it did little to answer questions about how prevalent child sexual abuse was in the Afghan military and police, and how calmly the American military looked the other way at the widespread practice of bacha-bazi, or boy play, in which some Afghan commanders keep underage boys as sex slaves. SIGAR said it had opened an investigation into bacha-bazi at the request of Congress in response to a 2015 New York Times article that described the practice as rampant. The article said that American soldiers who complained had their careers ruined by their superiors who had encouraged them to ignore the practice. So whistleblowers, people who actually tried to fight sex trafficking in Afghanistan, they were had their careers ruined by the brash in Afghanistan. So this is the American military, CIA, defense contractors. It seems that the same Knights Templar, Knights of Malta that Tim Ballard is associated with, the same kind of military-industrial complex, and the same theocons, right? These kind of right-wing religious people who want to fight wars for religious reasons. DOD and state only began efforts to address this issue after it was raised by the New York Times, said John F. Sopko, the Special Inspector General. And even after the story, the sufficiency of policies they've put in place and the resources they've committed seem questionable. When Congress passed the Lehigh laws, they prioritized the issue of gross human rights violations. As our report clearly shows, both agencies failed to live up to that task. A former Special Forces officer, Captain Dan Quinn, who beat up an Afghan commander for keeping a boy chained to his bed as a sex slave, said at the time that he had been relieved of his command as a result. We were putting people into power who would do things that were worse than the Taliban did, said Captain Quinn, who had left the military. So again, why isn't Tim Ballard exposing the CIA, or not the CIA, the military's role in sex trafficking in Afghanistan? He cares about Afghanistan. He cares about the Christians in Afghanistan. What is the Nazarene Fund doing to get these sex traffickers who are enabled by the American military? The Times also cited the suspicious death of Lance Corporal George Buckley Jr., a United States Marine who was killed at a checkpoint where he was stationed with a notorious commander who had a retinue of bacha-bazi boys. Corporal Buckley had complained about the commander and was killed along with 2 other Marines by one of the commander's boys. The SIGAR report made no mention of the cases of Corporal Buckley, Captain Quinn, or Sergeant Martland, and it appeared to have interviewed only 3 unnamed American soldiers who reported being aware of the practice, which many soldiers and Afghan officials have told journalists they know to be widespread. As of August 12, 2016, the Defense Department was investigating 75 instances of gross human rights violations, 7 involving child sexual assault, but even Defense Department officials acknowledged that that was a small portion of the total, the SIGAR report said. Under Lehigh law, United States military aid funds must be cut off to any foreign military unit implicated in gross human rights violations, which includes the practice of bacha boys with its enslavement and rape of young boys. But another provision of American law, called the Notwithstanding Clause, says that Afghan military aid should be available notwithstanding other provision of law. The practice is so widespread that at least one of the 2014 Afghan presidential candidates was a one-time CIA-backed warlord, Gul Agha Shirzai, who was widely accused of being a pedophile who keeps Baka Bazi boys. President Ashraf Ghani vowed to end the practice in a 2015 speech, but there have been few, if any, prosecutions by the Afghan authorities for Baka Bazi practices. Mr. Shizai is now the Minister of Border and Tribal Affairs in Mr. Ghani's government. So the CIA, right? The same CIA who Tim Ballard worked for, same CIA who Tim Ballard worked with former CIA operatives. And I'm guessing he still kept a relationship with the CIA to this year, and he might still have one today. So the same CIA that has its officers like Tim Ballard fighting against child trafficking actually is supporting Afghani warlords who engage in child trafficking. So we're also going to look at some of the American contractors like Blackwater, DynCorp, and other contractors. And again, once you have these wars, you send all these single men who are, dealing with PTSD and all these issues with no women. Their girlfriends are back home, and you plot them into a war zone, and we have total chaos. So and it's been going on since Vietnam. When you have these wars, you have lots of prostitution. These women prostitute themselves to American soldiers or defense contractors. And a lot of the times these women are young, 14, 13, 12. And the more perverted you are, you can get away with stuff like this. So let's look at the relationship between American defense contractors and sex trafficking. Nearly a decade after DynCorp International LLC employees were implicated in Bosnia for buying and selling women throughout Eastern Europe. So DynCorp is a military contractor, American military contractor, similar to Blackwater. So they get a lot of American military contracts to basically be soldiers, help out the military, whatever. The U.S. Army was told this February that supervisors of an Army subcontractor in Iraq had sexually assaulted women who were held in involuntary servitude. So the American military subcontractors are raping sex slaves. The women were recruited from their home nations with promises of well-paying beautician jobs in Dubai, says an Army memo summarizing the allegations, but were instead forced to surrender their passports, transported against their will to Iraq, and told they could only leave by paying a termination fee of $1,100. The accused subcontractors work for Army and Air Force Exchange Service, which runs stores, hair salons, movie theaters, and other operations on military bases. The allegations came from the State Department, which fielded questions from a freelance reporter who said she interviewed some of the abused women. The memo says the contractor moved the women to at least 3 locations in Iraq. They were subject to poor living and work conditions and sexually assaulted by unknown individuals, to include civilian contractor supervisors. In another allegation, a former Blackwater guard, remember we did a whole episode on Blackwater and the Knights of Malta and their kind of religious crusade, and a lot of the crazy sex acts and cocaine and steroids that they were doing. A former Blackwater guard said that he saw colleagues and American soldiers paying Iraqi girls for sex acts. The allegations were contained in an anonymous sworn statement submitted as evidence in a lawsuit filed last summer in the Eastern District of Virginia, alleging wrongful death and other abuses on behalf of families of Iraqi victims. The sworn statement was withdrawn by the Iraqi families, and the suit subsequently settled in January. So we know that Blackwater pays a lot of money. So we've seen when they killed all the civilians in Fallujah, they paid them all a lot of money. So that's what they do rather than face the court of law or anything. They just pay their way out of scandals. The former guard, who asked that the center and the Post not publish his name out of concern for his safety, said a cluster of children would occasionally gather around Americans near a hospital inside the Green Zone in 2005. The guard said he saw older boys collect the dollar bills while Iraqi girls, some as young as 12 and 13, stood behind pillars or storefront corners and performed oral sex for each customer. Disgusted, the former guard said he reported what he saw to Blackwater superiors and that the information was shared with Blackwater founder Eric Prince. He said no action was taken. So these are the Knights Templar and the Knights Malta and their wonderful Christian values. Eric Prince is a Knights Templar supporter and most likely a Knights of Malta member. So these guys and their Christian values, similar to Tim Ballard and his kind of CIA Knights of Templar Christian values like Eric Prince, they really don't care when the sex abuse is happening and they can't politicize it for their own benefit. It actually hurts them to have the sex abuse be exposed. They hide it. In late 2007, officials at Armor Corps, a company providing private security guards for the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, learned that some of their employees frequented brothels disguised as Chinese restaurants and might be engaged in sex trafficking. The company withheld the information from the U.S. government despite requirements to report it to the State Department and a congressional request for such information. According to a lawsuit filed by a whistleblower from the company, the matter is still being litigated. The management official for Armor Corps boasted openly about owning prostitutes in Kabul, according to the suit filed by James Gordon, who was at the time a senior Armor Corps supervisor. Also, an Armor Corps trainee had been caught bragging that he hoped to make some real money in the brothel business in Kabul when he got shipped there and planned to buy a woman for $20,000, Gordon said. He said he had a friend on the contract who had contacts in the brothel business, Gordon said. Gordon said he warned his bosses that one of their employees might be running a brothel in Kabul. Gordon also says he reported the trainees' alleged boast to Heidi McMichael, a State Department contracting officer. So here we have Donald Trump with George Nader. Now, George Nader is a pedophile and a sex trafficker. So Nader was first charged in 2019 with transporting and possessing pornographic images of children, including some featuring toddler-age boys, baby goats, and other farm animals. It's pretty disgusting. A month later in July, prosecutors added a sex trafficking charge, saying Nader had arranged the transport to his Washington home of a 14-year-old boy from the Czech Republic in February 2000. Nader allegedly held on to the child's passport after flying him in through Dulles International Airport. Once at his residence, he assaulted him nightly and kept the child silent by threatening him and his mother with imprisonment should they ever report him, according to the indictment. This is not Nader's first run with the law. He served 6 months after a 1991 guilty plea in Virginia to transporting child pornography. So he's been doing this for 30 years. Then in 2003, Nader was convicted in the Prague Municipal Court in the Czech Republic for sexually abusing boys, facing 10 charges there. He served a year in jail in Prague before being expelled from the country. The light sentences are believed in part to be the result of Nader's 30-year-plus connection to prominent movers and shakers in Washington. And again, he is connected to the same military, CIA defense contract that we have Tim Ballard connected to. So I would like to see, where is Tim Ballard on Nader? He's connected, he's getting all the pimps, but you don't see him getting his Chris Hansen on. He's not getting the mostly white and rich people who are actually buying the children and having sex with the children. He's getting the pimps who are, horrible people who are, trying to make some money out of a horrible situation. But a lot of the horrible situation is caused by the demand for sex trafficking, mostly by rich white foreigners. Last year, days before Mr. Trump took office, Mr. Nader helped set up a meeting at Seychelles Resort between Mr. Dmitriev, Emirati officials, and Eric Prince, the former head of Blackwater International Worldwide and advisor to Trump's transition team. The meeting at the bar of the Four Seasons Hotel overlooking the Indian Ocean was brokered in part to explore the possibility of a back channel for discussions between the Trump administration and the Kremlin. So we definitely went over a lot of the kind of the Knights of Malta, and a lot of them are like, kind of pro-Russian now. I guess one reason maybe is that they want to fight a holy war, not a cold war, now that Russia is not as permanent as it used to be. Now here's some more on Nader. Nader has served as an advisor to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, better known as MBZ, of the United Arab Emirates, and as a consultant to Blackwater founder Eric Prince. So Eric Prince is not only condoning sexual assault by his employees, but he's hiring a known sex trafficker and known child pornographer trafficker. All right, so this is Eric Prince, the kind of Christian crusader who has no morals and loves war. In 2018, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation questioned Nader in connection to suspicions that the UAE work had been involved with Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. In August 2016, Nader met with Donald Trump Jr., Eric Prince, and Joel Zamel, an Israeli entrepreneur and specialist in social media manipulation. So we have a mix of Christians, Muslims, and Jews all working together to manipulate social media and help Trump win the election. There are conflicting accounts to whether the nearly $2 million Nader paid Zamel after Trump's victory is attributed to that or not. In 2021, Nader pleaded guilty to violating U.S. campaign finance laws by using over $3.5 million to reach out to a front to Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. So he's working both sides. Nader had several run-ins with the law related to sexual abuse of children. He was convicted in the 90s for transporting child pornography publications, and in prison in 2003 for sexually abusing 10 boys in the Czech Republic. Okay. And then also he pleaded guilty in 2020 to flying a 14-year-old boy from from Europe to the US for sex and transporting pornography depicting child sexual abuse and bestiality. Eric Prince, the founder of Blackwater, the private security company now known as Academi, at one point hired Mr. Nader to help the company generate business deals in Iraq. In 2010, a deposition that Mr. Prince gave as a part of a deposition that Mr. Prince gave as a part of a lawsuit against the company, Mr. Prince described Mr. Nader as a business development consultant that we retained in Iraq because the company was looking for contracts with the Iraqi government. So now one big place that is connected to Tim Ballard is Haiti. That was one of the places he actually did a whole documentary called Operation Toussaint about him saving these poor Haitian sex slaves. Now, again, Haiti is a big place now, but who is purchasing and abusing the children in Haiti? Why isn't Ballard going after these people? It's good job. It's great he's going after the pimps and saving the children, but as long as there's this demand for underage sex slaves, a new pimp will pop up and new kids will pop up. So Port-au-Prince, Haiti. In the ruins of a tropical hideaway where jet setters once sipped rum under the Caribbean sun, the abandoned children tried to make life for themselves. They begged and scavenged for food, but they can never scrape together enough to beat back the hunger until UN peacekeepers moved in a few blocks away. The men who came from faraway places and spoke a strange language offered the Haitian children cookies and snacks. Sometimes they gave them a few dollars, but the price was high. The Sri Lankan peacekeepers wanted sex from girls and boys as young as 12. I did not even have breasts, said a girl known as Victim 1. She told UN investigators that over the next 3 years, from 12 to 15, she had sex with nearly 50 peacekeepers, including a commandant who gave her 75 cents. Sometimes she slept in UN trucks on the base next to the decaying resort, whose once glamorous buildings were overtaken by jungle. Here in Haiti, at least 134 peacekeepers exploited 9 children in a sex ring from 2004 to 2007, according to an internal UN report obtained by the AP. In the wake of the report, 114 peacekeepers were sent home. None were ever imprisoned. In one particularly grim case in Haiti, a teenage boy said that he was gang raped in 2011 by Uruguayan peacekeepers who filmed the alleged assault on a cell phone. Dozens of Haitian women also say they were raped, and dozens more had what is euphemistically called survival sex in a country where most people live on $250 a day, the AP found. So again, these wars, whenever you bring in soldiers, UN peacekeepers, that's a lot when the sex trafficking comes in. You have these horny soldiers with no women, very angry people, some perverts already coming in, and they start getting regular prostitutes. In a lot of these countries, prostitution starts at age 14, and then the real sicko ones, they start getting the 10 to 14-year-olds. Now, one of the reasons for child trafficking, according to the former Haitian prime minister, is that traffickers are targeting Haitians' children for human organs. So they're just killing them and taking their organs. Trafficking of children and human organs is occurring in the aftermath of the earthquake that devastated parts of Haiti, killed more than 150,000 people, and left many children orphans, Haitian Prime Minister Jean-Max Ballard said Wednesday. There is organ trafficking for children and other persons also because they need all types of organs, Ballard said in an exclusive interview with CNN's Christian Amanpour. He did not give specifics, but asked by Amanpour if there is traffic in children, Ballard said, the reports I received say yes. Haiti is trying to locate displaced children and register them so they can either be reunited with other families or put up for adoption, Bellarive said. But he said, illegal child trafficking is one of the biggest problems that we have. Both groups appear to be legitimate, but lots of organizations, they come and they say they were children of the streets. They're going to bring them to the United States. Bellarive said he's trying to work with embassies in Port-au-Prince to provide Haiti's children from traffickers. Not sure if this is connected. This is a Guardian article for 10 years ago. Again, so people are selling organs. I don't know if they come from Haitian children or where these organs come from, but this could be a reason for child trafficking. 2 New Jersey mayors and donors of political and religious figures were arrested and charged in a massive bribery and money laundering scheme that included traffic in human body parts. As a part of a 10-year investigation into pervasive public corruption in New Jersey, hundreds of FBI agents fanned out across the state this morning to make arrests and search offices. Later, law enforcement vehicles crowded in front of agency offices as agents waited to unload their quarry. One northern New Jersey man, Levi Isaac Rosenbaum, was charged with conspiring to traffic human organs. Officials said he promised to sell the witness's relative 160,000 a kidney he had acquired for 20,000. So there are people out there who are dealing on the black market and they are selling organs. And there is the Prime Minister of Haiti saying that Haitian children are being trafficked for their organs, which is very disturbing. A nonprofit has stated for 2 years that 2 managers knew for years that an employee had confessed to a history of sexual offenses against minors, but still allowed him to serve their organization as a missionary to Haiti. Jeremiah Mast from Millersburg, Ohio, was indicted in a Holmes County court on July 3rd with 7 felony charges of gross sexual imposition and 7 misdemeanor charges of sexual imposition. These crimes, which according to court documents, allegedly involved children under the age of 16 and some under 13, took place in Ohio between 1998 and 2008. Holmes County prosecutor Sean Warner said Mast pleaded not guilty to all charges. His lawyer, John Johnson, told NBC News. Mast also faces allegations of sexually abusing minors during his time serving Christian aid ministries in Haiti, according to the Berlin, Ohio-based nonprofit. Christian Aid Ministries said in the same letter that 2 managers at the organization had known about mass behavior since 2013 when he admitted to Christian Aid Ministries staff to sexual activity with boys under the age of 18 that had taken place several years prior in Haiti. Robert Flores, an attorney representing Christian Aid Ministries, told NBC News. The managers did not return repeated calls and messages seeking comment. So now we have another missionary, again, charged with sexually abusing children in Haiti. A Mennonite missionary from Virginia who has lived in Haiti for more than a decade has been sentenced to 23 years in prison for child sexual abuse in an impoverished Caribbean nation, officials said. James Arbaugh of the small Virginia town of Stuarts Draft is the latest American missionary to receive a hefty sentence for taking advantage of Haiti's extensive poverty and anemic rule of law to sexually abuse vulnerable youngsters. Earlier this year, he pleaded guilty in federal court to 1 count of traveling in foreign commerce from the U.S. to Haiti to engage in illicit sexual conduct with a child. He was sentenced Monday. All right, so we're going to end off talking about connections between the CIA and child trafficking, and there are 2 real big incidents, one being the Finders Cult. And again, Ballard is a CIA agent, which makes me definitely skeptical of him, and it looks like he's continued his relationship with the CIA. And I would like to see if he's trying to fight the sex trafficking within his own former agency. So this right here is the Finders Cult. Finders Cult was a crazy cult that would transport kids who they said like were kind of brainwashed and definitely abused. And one of the big reasons that we wouldn't get away with it is that they had cover up and help from the Central Intelligence Agency. Here is a document that was recently released by the FBI on the Finders Cult's involvement with the Central Intelligence Agency. Now, this can be a whole episode, but I just want to bring up some instances of the CIA being involved in child trafficking. It's hard to find examples of the CIA fighting child trafficking. Doesn't seem to be a big part of their agenda, but using child trafficking, enabling child traffickers, protecting child traffickers seems to be a big part of the CIA's agenda. Now, another one of these things was the Franklin scandal. Now, this is a whole documentary. I highly recommend you guys try and research all of this right now. But this came from a Republican by the name of Lawrence King, who was sexually trafficking young boys and girls from an orphanage called Boys Town in Nebraska to Washington, D.C. to be used to blackmail politicians and all these stuff. And it was, again, CIA backed. And I highly recommend everyone watch the documentary Conspiracy of Silence, or there's lots of podcasts you can listen to on it and kind of see. Sex was being sold from a congressman's apartment. Power broker serves sex, drugs, and it was all bugged. So I'm really grateful for Tim Ballard for making this movie, because I do believe child trafficking is a very, very important issue, but I believe that he may have ulterior motives. Now, if you guys remember Coney 2012, remember Coney 2012? We were making these child soldiers, we got to get these child soldiers, and it turned out to be a big, crazy bust. Coney was not even in the country, and the people they wanted us to support were using child soldiers too. So again, and we see in the movie Sound of Freedom, the bad guys are the Colombian rebels. They're the Colombian rebels, and they serve coke, and they also traffic in children. So the good guys are the Colombian government. But if you watch the Colombian government, they're also involved in trafficking of cocaine, and it's kind of these FARC communist rebels. So it's a very worldview of anti-communism, and it's also of kind of a white savior missionary mentality of saving these poor children of color from sex slavery, but they never go after the CIA, the military contractors, the soldiers, the missionaries, the people, the rich white foreign people who are actually involved in the sex trafficking. So I'm really glad he made this movie. I'm just really skeptical of him being both a Knights Templar, which is really a crazy organization that today is still very based on warmongering. And, if you promote war, you're breeding child trafficking. And someone from the CIA. The CIA has always you know, from even going back to like Roy Cohn and his like his sexual blackmail rings, which you can find out on Whitney Webb or my previous episode. So again, I'm very cynical of this character Tim Ballard and his motivations, his worldview, his ideology. And if you're interested in finding like the corruption angle, the him misspending the money, I highly recommend you listen to a guy by the name of Lynn Packer and go to a website by the name of American Crime Journal. And there's a really good episode by a colleague of mine, J.G. Michael, that he's also done on the kind of more of the corruption involved in the Operation Underground Railroad and the Sound of Freedom movie, Tim Ballard, Sean Reyes, Paul Hutchinson. But this is Reality Theory, episode 18. If you made it this far, man, like and subscribe, man. Like and subscribe. You made it this far. So thank y'all. Till the next episode.